So, crystal ball.
Yeah.
Where's this end up? Is this Game of Thrones and we're all lining up behind various banners and we're just going to meet on some field somewhere and work it out? Like, how's this going to play out?
That's what Keith wants.
I'm down for that second one, by the way.
You create wonderful word pictures.
You talk about it privately. We talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders drama-filled podcast. I'm your host, Dwiggy, and my co-host,
the master of drama.
Master of drama.
Yes.
We had Errol Samuelson, so Chief Industry Officer for Zillow, on our podcast today to talk about Zillow's new listing ban that they're doing, and we asked lots of tough questions. Keith, give everybody a little bit of background on this topic today.
Well, first of all, this is our first on-record public statement since the strategy was announced, so it was good to go to the source and get the thinking behind the what and why of it. We did ask the difficult questions. How'd you come up with it? Is the DOJ going to be upset about this? How did it feel when you announced it? We really got to dig deep with them on their thought process behind this, why they chose to do it, and what it's been like since they made that choice. So to get the chief industry officer to just talk into a microphone for 50 minutes about this approach and why they did it was very, very helpful for me. And I know it will be helpful for everyone who wants to learn more about this. You're going to dig it. Put it in your ears, kids.
Errol, welcome back to the show. We are bringing you on when there's no shortage of drama.
Nothing to talk about.
Nothing to talk about. So I'm remote, in case everybody can't tell. I'm in a hotel room in Texas. Keith is still there with Hulk smash above his right shoulder.
Where he belongs.
And where are you located today, Errol? Are you traveling?
No, I'm in our Zillow office in Vancouver today.
Nice. Awesome.
Outstanding.
Well, look, let's do real fast. We're not going to do any rapid fires or things because you have been on the show before. For people that want to know a little bit about you, we'll put a link in the show notes for the previous pod that we did with you last year. But just for anybody who doesn't know you, just real quick, just, title, background at Zillow, just like 1 minute line of where you are and where you got to. And then we'll dive into some questions we've got about all of the controversy happening in the business today. Yeah.
No, sounds great. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. I'm the Chief Industry Development Officer at Zillow. I just had my 11-year anniversary here at Zillow. Before that, I was president at Realtor.com for 7 years, chief revenue officer at Move. Before that, I worked at a bunch of other real estate companies. I ran a CRM company called Top Producer for a while. I've been in this prop tech space for about 30 years. So I've seen a few things, and this is one of the more interesting times, I think.
Yeah. Boy, isn't that the truth?
Yeah, buddy.
I literally just got off a podcast where I had to give historical perspective of the industry because I knew most of the viewers hadn't been in the business for more than 10 years. And I was like, let me tell you what it was like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Let's start here real quick. We have a lot of questions. We want to dive right in because we only got you for a short amount of time. And what most people are interested in is some of the moves that you guys have made recently. I would love for you to start out with just a little bit about Zillow's audience. I asked that because I've posted some stuff online showing traffic numbers of the portals recently, and just for context about this conversation that we'll have today. But can you give a little bit of an overall view on where Zillow is in the market today, sort of how big you guys are, like international presence, like a holistic view of the size of Zillow's presence today? Yeah.
Happy to. So Zillow is almost 20 years old at this point.
That's wild.
That's
surprising.
Believe, right? The company was founded on this idea of transparency, help consumers get educated, and if you do right by buyers and sellers, then the business is going to prosper. And so we've been fortunate. The business is doing well. We have more than 200 million consumers who come to our website every single month. We're particularly strong in mobile, so our mobile app is used 4 times more than the number 2 mobile app. And I think one of the things that people forget about sometimes is that Zillow is also the biggest rentals network. So we have more renters coming to Zillow than anyone else in the United States. And what that means is that the Gen Z and the alphas who are renting now, but are going to be buyers tomorrow, are already on Zillow. And so, you mentioned exposure. Obviously, real estate's local. We've got really strong traffic, in each local market. But we also have a lot of international traffic. So when you've got buyers outside of the United States looking, we have a lot of traffic. Certainly, we also operate in Canada. We have a lot of Canadians who are looking at vacation homes in the United States. They're on Zillow. So it's a broad audience. We have dreamers on the site, but we also have the most engaged home shoppers on the site. And so we're pleased with where we've ended up after 20 years of hard work.
I was looking at ComScore data, and you guys are double the closest company on traffic. I was making this statement the other day that, regardless of people's opinions about the portals, and we'll get into all of this stuff today, but I was like, you could take all of the brokerage website traffic and combine it all, and they wouldn't even get close to the second size of a real estate portal.
You could probably take all the traffic, combine it all, and then multiply by a factor of 10, and it still wouldn't get close.
Yeah, it was pretty. You guys have had a great run. Obviously, you've done a great job of gaining that traffic, and look, providing a really good service. There's a lot of the transparency that's happened in the business has come from pushing the industry forward. Certainly pushing or pulling to some degree in over the past 20 years. But I do think overall the consumer's in a much better spot about understanding real estate. Before I dive on my next question, I had this was a really interesting comment the other day. I was on another podcast, go figure, and they were bringing up how in the early 2000s, because you guys were founded in 2005, I believe, the use of a realtor like back in 2001 was 69% of the time, and today it's 88% of the time on the buy side. And what's fascinating to me is just the growth of the internet, and all of this information was always a threat, was talking about how it would replace the realtor and it would get rid of them, and there would, everything would happen without them. But what's ironic is it's been the exact opposite. Like the use of a buyer's agent has gone up with the advent of all of this technology and information. Do you have any thoughts on that? Just kind of off the cuff on watching all of this change over the past. I mean, not even just with Zillow, but just with your history at Realtor.com too, which was obviously around long before Zillow was.
Yeah. I mean, not only has usage of an agent gone up in the last 20 years, it's gone up in the last 5 years.
Yep.
And I think part of that is that as consumers get better informed, better educated, so they can get more information online, it becomes more abundantly clear to them that this is not a do-it-yourself kind of a proposition. You need professional help. And I think in terms of the agents, when your customer connects with you, you're dealing with a better informed agent or a better informed consumer, one with more realistic expectations. So I have always felt that transparency is a win-win. It's great for consumers, helps them make informed choices, but it's good for agents as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive in. So I got a lot of questions that Keith and I came up with. Let's talk about Zillow's position on CCP, office exclusives, and then now what I call and Keith call demo. We trademarked that. So if anybody uses that, we get 10%, whatever that is. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Delayed marketing exempt listing for viewers and listeners, the new policy NAR came out with. So
maybe before we get into what Zillow did, if it's okay, maybe just quickly, and I know it's not an easy one to frame up, but just in case someone listening has like some knowledge, but not the deep knowledge that the three of us have on sort of how we got to the place where Zillow made their announcement. James and or Errol, can you guys frame that up for the listener?
Go ahead.
Quickly.
Yeah. So in 2019, NAR announced a policy called the Clear Cooperation Policy, or CCP, given how much we love acronyms. Mm-hmm. And essentially what that policy said was that if you are going to publicly market a listing, then you need to make sure that listing goes onto the MLS within 1 business day. But there was an exception to that policy known as the office exclusives exception, which recognized that there are legitimately some sellers who want privacy, who don't want their listing in the MLS, don't want their listing on the internet. They're willing to make that trade-off. Maybe they get a bit of a lower price with less competition for their listing, but for them, paramount is privacy. So that's the policy that went. I think it went into effect in 2020. And I'd say in the last couple of years, there have been some voices, a handful, a minimum, a minority of brokers who were lobbying to get NAR to simply repeal the policy. And so NAR has a group called the, here, we're in the weeds now, folks.
That's
the MLS
right.
Technology and Emerging Issues Advisory Board. There's an acronym for that one too.
It's a hot board to be on.
Yeah.
That's sexy.
And they, starting sort of in the fall, they looked at saying, well, should we update the policy? Should we eliminate the policy? At Zillow, we submitted our point of view on what they should do. We had suggested actually that they tighten up the policy and that they go with what the Northwest MLS does, which simply says, before you publicly market a listing, you need to put it in the MLS. NAR, I'm going to say, it feels like a year ago. I'm going to say it was probably about a month ago, James. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Maybe we're living dog years here.
Yeah.
They updated the policy and they added a few new things to it. So one of the things they said is if you are going to keep your listing off the MLS as an office exclusive, then you need to get your seller to sign a disclosure form that helps them understand what the trade-offs are. But they left it up to the local markets to decide what the form of that document is going to be. So that was number one. And then the second thing they introduced was this new status, the demo, as you described it. Let's see if we can make that stick.
Yeah.
And basically, the demo is a delayed marketing status where you put the listing into the MLS. It's available to other MLS members. NAR was really clear. It has to be available in a VOW data feed that brokers can use to power their own websites. But you don't have to have that listing in IDX. You can publicly market that listing for some period of time before it goes from a delayed marketing sort of pre-market listing to being a full active listing. How long can it be in that status? Again, NAR left it up to the local discretion of local MLSs. And obviously, you guys talk to a lot of leaders from the MLS group industry. We do too. I do think there's a bunch of different opinions on quite how to implement this. So I think we'll see more in the coming months. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the gist of it. James, I may have missed something.
Can you explain real quick just the difference between an IDX feed and a VOW, just so people understand what that means from a UI and implementation perspective? So everybody's got the background.
And so if you got your acronym bingo card, that's two more you can cross off.
Bingo.
Already this soon. Wow. So IDX stands for Internet Data Exchange. And basically, this is a mechanism where, as a broker, I'm saying, listen, I would like to advertise other brokers' listings on my website. And I'm agreeing that in exchange, I will allow those brokers to advertise my listings. So it's basically sort of a mutual advertising agreement where brokers are saying, I'll advertise yours, you can advertise mine. But it's an all-in or an all-out kind of a system. So basically, if as a broker I say, well, I'm not going to grant you, James, permission to market my listing, then I don't get the other listings. The vast majority of broker websites out there today are powered by these Internet Data Exchange.
Like 95% of them, probably.
And look, the simple primary reason for that is when human beings go look for property, they want to see as many of the available properties for sale as possible. They want to have the widest aperture into the available homes for them to purchase that's on the market, right?
And it's really great for the listing brokerage, which is why most brokerages participate in IDX, because it gives them the broadest exposure for their sellers and listings. The second acronym you mentioned, VOW, stands for Virtual Office Website. And the idea behind that was, and it came about probably 15 years or so ago, maybe 20 years ago. And the idea was that there was a number of brokerages who decided they were not going to be traditional bricks and mortar companies. They were only going to operate online. And so the idea was that if you walk into a brokerage office, there is more information that you'll receive from an agent than you would see on the brokerage website. And so the VOW feed was designed so it had basically everything you could see if you walked into a brokerage office. You could see that on the VOW website that the brokerage was offering. Now, the catch here is that for a VOW feed, because it is meant to be essentially an online duplicate of the real world, there's a requirement to have some sort of client relationship between the internet user and the company operating the website. And so there's essentially a registration process where you add your name, you add your email, and so on. And so then once you get past that reg wall, then you can see the listings on the VOW website. But as you mentioned, because the vast majority of listings are in IDX, most brokers use IDX because it's easier. You don't need to have that reg wall. And so very few today use VOW.
Right. Like almost none. All right. So thank you for that background. That's very clear. So the comment you made, which I think is an important one, in demo status, when an agent uses this new status, to be clear, if MLS is implemented, because CRMLS, the largest MLS in the country, has declined to implement this new policy from NAR. That's a big controversy, which we don't need to get into today, but that is happening too. That it's required, NAR's requirement that it is in the VOW feed, which would mean that as long as you have a VOW feed on your website, they would have access to it. It's just the user has to log in to get it. So I'm assuming that applies to you and anybody else that's aggregating VOW feeds.
Yeah, that's right. Now, so I think what you'll see as people implement this is, here's 25 listings in Santa Monica, and there's 3 more, but you need to log in to see the 3 additional listings. Right. I don't love that experience. Anytime you ask an internet user to log in, you're creating some. Right. But the good news is that those listings are at least available.
Right. Okay. I think that's a good segue. So, I guess, did you have any opinions on this first? Just, I want to make sure I left that question there, however you want to answer that. So,
yeah, I mean, look, we're not the ones who create the policies. NAR does. We can live with this new policy. I do think the fact that NAR decided to keep clear cooperation proves the point that a lot of us in the industry have been making, that transparency is important for consumers, for buyers. It's best for sellers. So I think that they made that point. And I think the second thing they did by adding this disclosure form for sellers, I think they made it really clear that there is some risk to sellers. You're probably not, we have research that shows you will on average not get as high a price. We have research that shows it's going to take meaningfully longer to sell your home.
Not and just so, you, multiple MLSs had the same research.
Yeah, yep. Fair point. Yep. Fair point. And so that disclosure form, I think, is a real positive because it then causes generates the conversation between the agent and the seller to say, here are your options. You have choice, but it's important for you to understand your trade-offs. So I think that was a very positive development.
Okay. All right. Keith, you want to follow up on anything before we dive in further?
No, I mean, we're going to get to, I do have your thoughts. I guess, yeah, I'll just ask you now. So okay. NAR made a call. NAR made a call. What were your thoughts on it? Would you have done it differently? Do you feel comfortable? I'll go first if you want, if that makes you feel better. I know it's a collaborative environment between all of us in the industry, but we still get to have opinions. Do you think NAR made the right call?
Look, I wasn't in the room when they were debating this. I'm not in their shoes. I think, our position is that more transparency is good. Anything that can help all buyers to have fair and equal access to listings is good. Anything that helps sellers understand their options and the consequences of the various paths they might take is good. And so, we can work within the confines of this new policy, and that's what we're going to do.
Okay, I'll go now. Okay. Look, I also wasn't in the room where it happened. I just like quoting Hamilton whenever I can. And I do understand the pressures. I think I understand the pressures that NAR is feeling. Look, if you just had a $500 million settlement nearly around seller choice, and then a vocal minority of constituents in the industry are screaming about seller's choice from the rooftops, you probably can't ignore that one and just sort of keep it moving. That's one that you are going to have to respond to and do it in a way through a lens of protection. And I get my brethren on this side of the aisle in the residential real estate space, it pisses you off. You think NAR sold you out or didn't have the stones to stand up. And I think there's a modicum of truth to that. Again, the views being expressed are the views of Keith Robinson, not Errol James, Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered, Zillow, or any of their affiliates. Okay. But I understand if I just got my head caved in by a massive lawsuit. There's something called recency bias that is a real thing, and that recency bias is going to shape the decision making that propels me forward in this specific instance. So I will say there are things I would have changed about this, but I absolutely understand how you could get a room and end up here because they've got internal pressures of their own that they have to solve.
I would just say, though, that if you want to talk about legal risk, and none of us here are attorneys, there's probably more legal risk in encouraging your seller to keep the listing off the MLS without explaining to them what that means.
Yeah.
Than having a policy which says you have the option of keeping it off the MLS, but if you're going to publicly market it, then you need to put it on the MLS. In other words, pick a path, right? It's either private or it's public. I don't personally think that that's a super risky policy. But I do hear your point about recency bias and, feeling a bit bruised and battered for sure.
Well, I think the comment I'll make, everybody knows my views on this. If you're not, then you're not on planet Earth at this point. But I do think it's important that people understand that there are players who aren't following the rules. So part of the issue is that there's players that are doing office exclusives, but then they're publicly marketing them. That's the crux of the problem, is that if you want to play by the rules, which means it's an internal communication. There's no public marketing. You don't get to have your cake and eat it too. So I think there's that, which I think NAR was weighing in the process, but everybody knows my view on that. Let's dive a little further here. So let's go to the controversy, which is why you're here. So you guys took the position of banning certain types of listings if they're not displayed to the entire public, meaning what I just emphasized, where people are publicizing things to a certain group of people and excluding others. So, and I have your quote is, if it's marketed to any buyer, it gets marketed to all buyers. So tell us why you took this approach on what it is. And some people are calling it extreme. So, how do you feel about that? And give us the background on the ban.
Yeah. The phrase that you just said, that if it's available to some buyers, it needs to be available to all buyers, is sort of the underlying principle that you can apply when you look at the rule or the standard and the way we're planning to implement it. And really, it's about fairness. So there are legitimate reasons that you might wish to keep your listing private, right? You might not want to have it in the multiple listing service. You might not want it on the internet. Maybe you're a celebrity, right? You're a federal judge. Someone had the use case, you're getting a divorce, but you don't necessarily want everybody to know about that yet. You like to get the house sold first. And that's fine. And we support that option to have privacy. And that's what an office exclusive is under the CCP policy. Where we think you're running into issues around fairness is what you just described, James. So a broker takes a private listing, but then they publicly market it only to a handful of buyers, right? And they use that listing actually to attract other agents. So they're using that listing to recruit. So basically they're saying to agents at other brokerages, listen, we've got this secret inventory that's behind the velvet rope. But if you come join our brokerage, you get access to that. Mm-hmm. They're using it to lure buyers, saying you might wish to work with someone at James's company, but if you do that, you're not going to be able to have access to these other listings. So you're going to need to work at our company. So what's happening there is the brokerage is encouraging the seller to keep their listing off the MLS, but it's not a privacy issue because they are publicly marketing it to a select group of buyers. They're using, so the privacy argument goes out the window. They're using that listing to essentially attract agents, attract buyers, and if they sell it inside the private network, double end the commission. So I get why the brokerage, if they're thinking singly about what's going to benefit the company, I get why they would do that. At least I would say benefit the company in the short run. But it's bad for sellers, and we've talked about this. Bright MLS has done a survey. We've done a survey. Your typical seller nationwide leaves about $5,000 on the table, according to our survey. If you don't put it in the MLS, if you go to the state of California, where you are, James, that's $30,000. New York, New Jersey, it's closer to $15,000. I think if I remember right, in Bryce study that in the Mid-Atlantic, they found the delta was around $17,000. This is a really significant number for sellers.
And several weeks longer on the Bright study. And
Uh,
they have a full-time economist over there doing things. Lisa, she's amazing.
Yeah,
So
she's
like,
great. Yeah. And
yeah.
our research shows the same thing, weeks longer to sell. And so, to me, it feels like that's consumer harm for the seller. It's clearly consumer harm for the buyer. If as a buyer in this limited inventory market, where I don't have a lot of options anyway, in a market where we have, affordability challenges, keeping homes off the market doesn't help affordability. Keeping homes off the market doesn't help buyers get into their dream home. And so it's really bad for buyers as well. And so fundamentally, we felt that brokerages who are engaging in this practice, taking listings purportedly to be private, but then publicly marketing to a small group of buyers is fundamentally bad for the industry and it's bad for consumers. And the thing that we were concerned about is, once one brokerage does this, it's only a matter of time until other brokerages feel pressured to do the same thing. And especially if you're a large company. And so now you've got not just one private listing network in a market, broker B and C and D all have theirs. And all of a sudden, this incredible cooperative that has been so amazing to create liquidity in the U.S. real estate market, that is the MLS, that cooperative breaks down. And now you have the situation you have in Europe, where if I want to see what's on the market, I literally need to go talk to 8 different brokerages. And I don't see how that is good for anybody, because that is the ultimate sort of outcome if these private listing networks proliferate. And so what we decided was to have a policy that says you're welcome to market that listing privately. But if you take that listing that's in your private network and start marketing it to some buyers, then you need to put it in the MLS. You need to have it available to all other portals, not just us, our competitors too, so that there is fairness in the marketplace.
I have to ask this because this is the common thread that we're getting online. And, there's some potential validity to it, but like, is this really about that? Or is it about you guys wanting to make sure inventory stays on your website, which is the common thing I'm reading from people, is that you have a business interest in making sure that this stays on your site to produce more leads and sell more stuff to agents. That's the thread we're hearing online. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think Brian Barrero said this really well. 2 things can be true at once, right? So we do want to have as much inventory as possible on our site. And this is also very, very pro-consumer, And look, I would say that we're well positioned. We've got a great brand. We've got good audience. We talked about that a bit earlier. We feel comfortable that we can thrive, under a variety of different business models. There are portals in Europe, portals in Australia that don't live in an environment with MLS, and they do just fine. We don't think that is a world that is best for consumers.
But I think you guys would make more money if you went down the other road, ironically. Like, if you think about it today, everybody gets their listings on your website at no cost.
Right.
Now you're going to be like, oh, James, but you have to pay to get lead. My point is the listings are on the website still, and there is an ability for people to contact you. Whereas in the rest of the world, I may be wrong, but I'm not a portal expert, but I think you have to pay as a listing agent on everywhere else. Yeah, it's much more like CoStar, right?
It is a classified model. It's paid inclusion. One thing that I think is interesting, if you go back to the late 1990s, early 2000s, the real estate industry was paying over $5 billion a year on newspaper ads. Okay, and that's in like $1999. That spend has gone almost to zero, right? Mm-hmm. And that's money that went back into the pockets of the listing brokers. And the reason for that is because, to your point, their listings can reach a much broader audience on us and on our competitors for free. But that's great for consumers.
Yeah. I'll make a point, and then Keith, I know you want to get into the details of this ban a little bit more granular.
Yep.
I wanted to add some historical perspective because I think it's important for everybody to understand the world that we're looking at. And Errol's correct. I've been vocal on this, so it's not like I'm shy about this opinion. This world we're looking at where this fragmentation was literally the world we came from. It's a world that my grandfather was literally part of in the 60s and 70s with a very large company. What most people don't understand is small independents didn't exist. It was controlled by large companies because they would hold inventory back because there was only a thing called an MLS book, and every 30 days it'd be printed, and everybody would try to sell their inventory internally first before they cooperate with everybody else. And the reason why there's only a few large brokerages is because of the game that is trying to be recreated today. And for clarity, it was awful for agents, the brokerage, sellers, and buyers, because nobody had any clue what was actually for sale in the marketplace. And so the past 40 years has been spent creating this marketplace. While not perfect by any means, there's lots of work to do still. It is by far the easiest and greatest marketplace ever created on planet Earth. And it's something that I think people forget. The rest of the world, and you know this, Errol, I mean, there's an international MLS forum where they're literally trying to figure out how to build the very system that the United States has spent 40 years building in the rest of the continent or rest of the planet so that people can do the system we have. I read a post by an agent in Australia who was like basically talking massive amounts of crap to American agents going, you guys don't even understand like how good you have it. We don't have buyer representation in Australia. A, it's done via auction. B, we don't have this MLS system, and you guys are nuts to try and tear this thing down. I'm going to publish that at some point because I know people they only know what's in their own bubble. They don't have perspective of sort of where things are elsewhere. I was
just going to add to that. Here's the good news. When you talk about looking back over 40 years, the general trend line in American real estate has been towards openness. Mm-hmm. There's a few bumps along the way, but if you were to look at that trend line, it is increasing openness, increasing transparency. And honestly, that's been driven by consumers.
Yeah.
And I don't think consumers will tolerate.
They won't.
Who have experienced this amazing, liquid marketplace. I don't think they're going to tolerate a world where people try to put listings behind walls, hide listings, do selective marketing. I think it's time to continue moving forward.
I agree completely. Because look, in the 60s and 70s, they didn't know they could have something different. So they just accepted it, right? But they've had something different.
Right.
And so once you experience something different, to go back to this old sort of archaic closed way, I think you're right. The human beings who buy houses are going to revolt and not be okay with it.
There's a great story out today, just real fast, Keith, I want to throw this in here, of a seller who wanted a certain price for their home, and she posted it online, and it's going to get picked up by the news, I guarantee it. And she wanted a price. The agent said, why don't we test the price internally first? It was inside this brokerage's firm. They found a buyer. They agreed to the price that she wanted. So it's two people total.
And it was list price, James?
It was at list price that she wanted.
List. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They got full list, and she then the buyer eventually backed out going, I feel like I'm overpaying. And then the seller was like, well, if only two people saw it and I got my price that I wanted, why would we not open it up to the whole marketplace to see what else is out there? So she told the agent she didn't want to do office exclusive anymore and wanted it on the MLS, specifically Zillow as well, and ended up getting an offer for $100,000 over the price that she wanted. And the only reason I knew about this is because she happened to see one of my posts and was like, basically saying office exclusives are a really bad idea. I would have lost $100,000 had I not put it on the open market. And I cannot for the life of me understand any logical argument from anyone. It's like, well, the seller wanted this and they got that, so they got the price. You don't actually know what the home is worth until you put it on the broader marketplace to determine what the house is worth. It's just so stupid to me, these arguments that are happening, where I'm like, that's not logic. That's called supply and demand economics. Have you managed to figure out how to defy something that the rest of the world uses? Like, you need a Nobel Peace Prize. So it's mind numbing to me that these conversations are happening. And by the way, I've had two more that have come out now. So it's going to be a problem, which I'll get to in a second. I know Keith wants to ask a question on specifics, but there's going to be litigation here. Anyways.
Right. So about the ban. So you decide, now you were in this room. So I imagine that was a room that had full of thoughtful discussion. I know you're publicly traded, so don't tell us how the sausage is made. But do give us the details on the ban, what qualifies, what doesn't, and any light that you can shed on. Because my intuition is that was not an easy place to land, that this is what we're going to do. Or maybe it was. But anything that you could shed on that process, I think would be interesting for the audience as well. So details on the ban, and how'd you end up with that as the strategic choice for you guys?
Yeah. You're right. A lot of thought went into it. I think where we landed was ultimately what is best for consumers, for buyers and sellers. It's always been the North Star at Zillow. That's always served us well. And we thought that what we were seeing developing quickly in the marketplace is trend to multiple brokerages either choosing to or feeling pressured to start holding listings off the open market. It was really going to hurt a lot of people. And to be clear, we're not looking to catch anyone unaware. I mean, this is the reason we've announced the policy saying it's coming, get ready for it. We'd rather not show any listing if we could. But let me sort of get into details because I think that's helpful. So this policy applies to any listing that is under an exclusive listing agreement between a brokerage and a home seller. It does not apply to truly private listings. So the true office exclusive where the seller wants privacy and that's marketed within the brokerage, that's 100% fine. Basically, sort of delayed marketing or coming soon listings are also not impacted by the listing standards so long as, number one, they're in the MLS, and number two, they're available for public display. Then they're fine. Rental listings are fine. New construction listings sold by the builder, so that's not under an exclusive listing agreement, are okay. A lot of times those new construction listings, like we have a bunch of them on Zillow, are floor plans. And you look at a community and you pick the lot and you pick the floor plans. So
right.
A lot of MLSs, quite frankly, don't even support that data structure. For sale by owner listings are okay. Again, they're not under an exclusive listing agreement. Really, the only listings that would get impacted by this are listings where the listing was initially in a broker's private network. That broker is out there marketing those listings to some buyers, but hasn't put those listings in the MLS, hasn't shared those listings with other agents, other brokerages, and then later decides, well, oops, that didn't work. Now we're going to put it in the MLS. And at that point, we're saying you need to make a choice up front. Either you're going to market this privately or you're going to market it publicly. This notion of I'm going to have a foot in each camp, right? I'll try and use these private listings to attract buyers and other agents, but also enjoy the MLS cooperative. Also have all the IDX listings on my website.
Yeah, right.
But not share mine. We don't think that that's right. It's not fair.
Candidly, I think it's something that NAR should have stepped in to do, but that's just me. So, I mean, it's actually enforcing, or the MLS, it's enforcing the rules that are already in place, technically, that are there with that. So what happens if they do that? If they actually go down that path, you ban the listing, what happens with it? I guess the question I'm asking, people always ask is, how do you guys know that it was that way is the first question. And second, if they did do that and you ban it, what's the process for the seller to be able to get the listing back on Zillow? So two questions.
So we've built some tech, which we think will allow us to figure out which listings were quasi publicly marketed. And so we'll flag those property addresses. And this is really just about that one listing. So it's not about the agent's other listings. If the listing were to expire, and the property was relisted at a different brokerage, then that sort of resets things, and that listing would be allowable to be showed on Zillow. And so again,
just to be clear, I want to make sure I got that. Different brokerage or different agent within the same brokerage, just for clarification.
Different brokerage.
Different brokerage. Okay. All right. Good to know. Okay. All right. I got one on legal, and I can combine a couple I have here. So there's a lot of people saying that this violates antitrust or NAR and MLS policy, that you don't have the right to do that. Give us your thoughts on that. Yeah.
I think there's a number of smart attorneys who have weighed in on this. I know Ed Zorn had an article in Inman where he pointed out he thought that this was okay. I think the key is to take a look at what the IDX rules say. So IDX does not require you to display every listing in the feed. So for example, I could create a website that is for waterfront homes only, and I wouldn't show any homes that were not on the water. Or I could create a website called Listed Today, which would only show listings that came on the market in the last 24 hours.
Got it.
That's okay too. The key under IDX is it has to be an objective criteria, and you cannot discriminate. So if I said, I'm not going to show listings from brokerage A, but I will show listings from brokerage B, that's a clear violation.
That's a big problem. Yeah,
right. Violation of IDX rules. But what we're doing here is we have an objective criteria. We say it doesn't matter what brokerage you're with. This is our criteria for which listings we're going to display, and that is completely allowable under IDX.
Yeah. I've read the policy, by the way, the same policy you're referring to. So, the other people, well, I guess that's a good question. We'll just go there for a second. Seller choice. Sellers should have choice. Sellers should have choice to do what they want with their own home. Freedom, like all these things that keep thrown out there. That was a reference to my debate. So
I thought you were going full Braveheart.
No, I was I almost did on stage once. So what is what's your response to that? The seller should have the ability to choose where they want, how they want, et cetera.
Yeah. So I think we're confident that we are sort of on the right side of this. And it's not just us. Recently, the Consumer Policy Center and the Consumer Advocates in American Real Estate, both pro-consumer groups, have commended our standards because they believe it is doing right by consumers, sellers, and buyers. Sellers do have choice, but we think that they need to have informed choice. Consumers don't know what they're not being told.
Right.
So before I decide to go with my agent's recommendation to keep the listing off the multiple listing service, my agent needs to really explain to me what the trade-offs are for different approaches. And then once I'm informed, then you have informed seller choice. And I personally believe that's the crux of the issue right now, is that sellers don't know when they make these choices.
They do not. I tell you, that's a big problem.
Yep.
I've seen some of the disclosures.
Yeah.
This is such a problem. Like there's some that are just absolute blatant steering. There's some that are written really well. And I have so much concern about this being left up to each local MLS and or brokerage to do. Like I think this is going to be a massive issue.
It's my biggest frustration with NAR, honestly. I feel like they had an opportunity to craft that disclosure in a way that was clear or
the outline of a disclosure.
Correct. At least guidance on how to craft one, right? And language guidance and that sort of thing.
Needs to have all these things in it, sort of stuff.
And do it in common sense language, not like some 3-page attorney vetted, attorney process. I know attorneys will have to read it eventually to approve it, but there's a difference between writing a legal document and writing something that is clear and easy to understand for a human being making a big decision. And letting that disseminate down to each individual MLS, that means the quality of those documents is going to vary widely based on the quality of those MLSs.
And the pressure by their membership.
Correct.
I think, EXP has shown tremendous leadership on the issue of transparency. Leo came out with a form that EXP is going to
did an amazing job.
Open source.
It's a great form.
I think it does exactly what you said. It puts it in everyday English. There was a great article when it comes to this notion of disclosure. There was this great article by Summer Gorelick in Inman. So she was a special investigator, with the California Department of Real Estate. So we've got this person with those credentials, and then she imagines a scenario where the DRE comes in and starts asking you questions about your private listing network program. And it's fantastic. And at the end of it, she goes, if your palms got sweaty reading these questions in this imaginary conversation with the DRE, that's not a good sign.
We'll put that in the show notes, by the way, for everybody to read it, because Summer did a fantastic job on that. She was at Arello last week too and did a keynote on the very subject. I'll tell everybody's listening, the state regulators are watching. They are acutely aware of this stuff, and their biggest thing they're going to look at from just some conversations I had in the hallway, are you properly disclosing consumers? Are you steering them? And are you doing your fiduciary responsibility? And I'll give you another one to throw in there. If you are being incentivized in any way, shape, or form to do office exclusives and you aren't disclosing that is a real problem as well.
The other bummer, not to look, an agent has to take some personal responsibility for knowing what they're doing and thinking it through. But a lot of agents are, their leadership is guiding them at the local level on like, here's how you should go do your listing presentation, right? And they're being trained to do it in a way that sounds good until you really slow down and think it through. And I think there are agents that are unwittingly going out there and they just haven't taken the time to think it through. Made sense when it was, here's how to do it. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that's cool. That's good for my seller. I'll go talk to him about that. And then they go out there and talk to him about that. And some of those people, I think, could easily get in trouble and unwittingly. And unfortunately, you have a higher obligation as a licensee. You're supposed to know, right? You're supposed to know. And especially if it's what's best for the human being that you serve. So it's going to be a mess.
Keith, a comment to throw on there, and we'll get to the next question. So we got to wrap here soon. I read a recent study because you've heard me say this, like, I think informed consent's fine. My problem with it is nobody reads anything. So I went and I read a study from Deloitte recently. They found that 90% of American consumers never read any of the terms and conditions or legal documents that they sign. 90% of people don't read what it is. So even if we have informed consent, Errol, if they literally, how many times, Keith, when you were working with a seller, they just said, just tell me what I need to do. Like, just give me your opinion. Like, what do I, this is why they're hiring you, is to give them direction. And so I even though I think this is okay, I worry that it's still not going to stop some of these issues. So they just don't know what they're signing or are not going to get explained to them. So I hope I'm wrong. All right, go ahead, Keith.
Well, I got one. This is just sort of silly and irreverent, but how did it feel to have like a big chunk of the industry talking about how Zillow's great? Because you don't always get that. Like, like the comments section were fire. So all jokes aside, like a lot of people have clapped and celebrated the move that you all have made. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think, and then I'd also like to know, like, where's this all going to end up? What do you think the next shoe to drop on this is? But how did it feel to be the golden child for an afternoon? And then where do you see this all shaking out?
It was terribly off-putting. I was very uncomfortable.
They didn't know what to do with themselves.
Didn't know what or how to feel, weird. Right?
This is new.
What I thought was great is that the vast majority of people that we've spoken with, including people who have not historically necessarily been big fans of Zillow, the vast majority of people who understand real estate understand that this is an important issue and that transparency is the right side of the issue to be on. And I think that's great. It is a very small number of voices who are pushing to hide listings that harm consumers.
Do you think that those small voices, just sorry to follow up, but I just wanted to ask this. Do you think that you guys are going to get litigation from it, that they're going to try and stop you? I don't know what the process. I'm not a lawyer. None of us are, but is it, because it's not just you, by the way. Redfin did the same thing. They backed you essentially, which is essentially going to be Rocket. So the two, according to Mike Del Preti's report he put out yesterday, the two companies in residential real estate with the largest cash basis, are pushing on this. You're on the same page essentially. Like, but do you think that you guys expecting litigation or even the Department of Justice to investigate you for doing this? Just curious.
I can't speak for the DOJ, but if you look at their mandate, right, what is it? It's to promote fair competition, right? It's to make sure that that businesses don't do things that hurt consumers. So I feel that what we're doing is pro-consumer. The same would apply to litigation. So when we're doing something that fosters competition, right, creates transparency in the marketplace, is based on research, solid research, not conjecture, I feel like we're in a pretty good spot to be. I would rather be on this side of the issue than the other side of the issue.
Yeah.
Fair point.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's a fair point. All right, let's wrap on this, Keith. What's our last question we've got?
So crystal ball.
Yeah.
Where's this end up? 90 days from now, 6 months from now this was sort of the most recent kerfluffle. I just want to use that word into a microphone. And we're back to business as usual. Is this Game of Thrones and we're all lining up behind various banners and we're just going to meet on some field somewhere and work it out? Like, how's this going to play out? I'm down for that second one, by the way.
You create wonderful word pictures. As I said earlier, look, the trend line for real estate over the last 20 years has been transparency.
Yep.
Why is that? It's because consumers shape the direction our industry goes. Ultimately, it's what's best for buyers and sellers. So I think that after the kerfluffle, you can put that in the show notes.
Boom.
That I think the industry is going to end up continuing to push toward transparency. Great agents know that they put their customers' interests first. Mm-hmm. We partner with the best agents. We partner with the best companies. We build a bunch of tools for them to help them be successful. And I think that the brokerages, the agents, and the companies that put the consumer first are always the ones that will win. And there can be bumps along the way, but if you put consumers first, you are going to win.
Well, you're not going to get any arguments from our side. We've been pretty clear about our opinions on that. So that's probably a good way to end it. First of all, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And I will add, and we obviously, like, in the industry, it's always a friendly competition, but in this particular regard, I am also happy that you guys did that. I think it is a pro-consumer policy. I think it was smart, and it also protects sellers and buyers from a marketplace. We've spent so much time building, not going back to the way it was. So I'm sure there'll be more kerfuffle. Did I get it right? Did I say it right?
You did.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. All
Look
three
at
of us
that. Word of the day.
There it is. Word of the day.
I'll add one more,
kids.
I'll add one more point.
Okay.
To the people out there who all you can glean from this is that Zillow just did this because it helps Zillow. I love you, but you're a moron. Like, that's just wrong. Now, I think two things can be true at the same time, as Errol said before. Like, if you hate Zillow, whatever. Like, I would urge you to find a hobby, maybe gardening or something that could bring you a little more joy. But the right thing is the right thing. And they could also have something that it's a good strategic business decision too, but they aren't sacrificing the first one for the second. They're handling the first one first and then taking care of the second one second. And if you can't see that, go ahead and email James. He'd love to talk to you about it.
You can just follow me on social media.
Yeah.
I'm happy to debate you.
It won't take long. So I don't know why I wanted to get that out, but I wanted to get that out, and I'm sure my inbox will be flooded with.
Yep. It's Keith on social media too.
Yeah.
So Errol, thanks my friend for being here, genuinely. And I'm sure the people have questions, so we'll get this out, and obviously there'll be more headlines, I'm sure, over the next few months, but hopefully the consumer ends up continuing to be in the right position on this. So
great. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Listen, we care about you deeply, which is why we never want you to miss an episode of this podcast. Subscribe now. It's just a push of a button.